Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Ali Tinsley, and I run our webinars here in Americas. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar, Defense in-Depth Strategies to Protect Critical Entra ID Data. Today, we have got Stefan van der Wal, who is our Principal Technical Marketing Engineer, and he will be presenting for us. Before I let Stefan take over the show, though, I do have a couple of housekeeping items for you. Just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. You will receive a copy of the recording in an email from me tomorrow. That email will also have a couple of important resources. So some things that Stefan is reviewing today and some things for anything that we've got coming up. Second, we do encourage audience participation. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A box. It should be a box with a question mark in it. We are live. Please ask questions. Stefan is a pro. He can handle it all. So please ask away. We also have reactions. So if you like what he's saying, you can give him a thumbs up. You can cry, you can party, you can be shocked, whatever you feel. It helps us get a pulse on where you are. That is all for me. Stefan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ali. Really appreciate it. So welcome, everyone. Just before we dive into the meat and bones of this, let me introduce Barracuda just for a moment. So Barracuda has been around for a while. We are very passionate about delivering products that are easy to buy, deploy, and use. And essentially, whenever we think of creating a product or selling a product into market, we think about, okay, how are we going to give people back some precious minutes of their day? Today, I'm going to be covering some elements with regarding to Entra ID backup and XDR, which to me really embody that sort of philosophy. But Barracuda has much more. So we have a very broad platform where we secure email, data, network, and applications. For us, this is Barracuda One. This is our ecosystem. This is where we build microservices that support these various use cases to ensure that our customers are protected 24/7 through the various ways cybercriminals can come into your organization. We look to give you insights. We look to give integrations with the various other platforms that are out there, all with that actually, to us, ambitious, but also simple goal to make cybersecurity better and to make your organization safer. So with that short and sweet introduction, the first thing I actually want to do is ask you a question. Namely, how important do you feel user identity is to your day-to-day business? It's just for me a check to see if everyone here is in the correct webinar and if I'm going to be telling you the correct story today. This is very much a leading question, trust me. Just let it go for a little bit so everyone has the chance to vote and I can have a sip of water. There is, most of the people said is, so 85% is very important, 30% it's somewhat important, and 1% said, well, it's unimportant. I'm hoping to turn your idea around on that as this webinar goes along. So let's talk about identity and why I personally feel that identities are important within cybersecurity. So identity helps us ensure, to a degree, who someone is. Is someone allowed access to a system? Is someone allowed access to data? Is someone allowed access to a process? This identity, who they are and what they are allowed to do, basically dictates what actions they can take within my environment. Do I want admin actions to be taken by a general user? Probably not. There can be a lot of overlap in these things, but usually we try to isolate it for certain roles and functions, especially where it comes to the more sensitive type of actions within an environment. Last but not least, identity is a primary target for criminals. If I want access to an organization, I need to compromise an identity, or at least that is usually my easiest way forward, either through phishing, through an exploit, or simply getting access to an Active Directory or an Entra ID in order to give myself as a criminal more access to those various environments. If I cannot do anything with a user identity, I can basically open up my environment to the world and say, I don't know who you are, and I don't care. Please come and get it, which is, in most cases, a bad idea, especially when it comes to important and sensitive data, such as personal data, passwords, etc. So where's a lot of our identity data today? Microsoft has done an incredible job securing or allowing user identity to be used. Where it started off with Active Directory on-prem, a lot of organizations have pivoted to cloud services, either through Azure or M365, or even third-party solutions that Microsoft allows access through a product called Entra ID. And Entra ID is basically the cloud-based service of Active Directory. There are some nuances, which we will not be going into, but there's a big move from the on-prem identity environment into the cloud. If you would have asked me in 2018, Stefan, is Entra ID going to take over the role of Active Directory? I would have laughed. But slowly but surely, Microsoft has been putting more functionalities into the platform, and there's now organizations starting their infrastructure journey, and they don't have an on-prem Active Directory at all anymore. Their identity completely lives within the cloud environment. So what, among others, does Entra ID really contain? At its core, because it's user management, it will have a user identity consisting of name, where do they work, email, that sort of things, then the groups that they belong to. So for instance, I'm part of the technical marketing engineering division, so that is reflected within my group or within my roles, and those can be contained within administrative units. I'm from Europe, so it would make more sense to put me in an administrative unit for Europe rather than one for the US, because there are some elementary changes. Then Entra ID contains much more. So when I log in for my day-to-day, and with me, many users, a little website called myapplications.microsoft.com allows me access to a host of third-party apps, be it my Salesforce, be it my NetSuite, be it any technical or even Barracuda applications that I can access using my Microsoft credentials. Those are part of enterprise applications and app registrations, where it's a little bit of a difference whether you built the app yourself or it's something that is delivered by a third party. Aside from that, Entra ID contains authentication strength policies that will tell you how strong an authentication method needs to be and what you are allowed to use. So for instance, am I allowed to use my mobile phone to do MFA, or do I need to have a separate token that allows me access? When it comes to elements like conditional access policies, that will inform me how am I allowed access. So for instance, if I go to a Barracuda office, this is a completely fictional story, by the way, but it does work that way. If I go to a Barracuda office in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, and I sit down and I open my laptop and I want access to Salesforce, then it can go, hey, listen, because this is a trusted IP from a named location, this device is known by us. It's part of device management. It has a BitLocker key. It's completely secured the way we want it. It is allowed access to Salesforce. All these elements play a role in helping Microsoft Entra ID understand who I am, what I'm here to do, and where I'm allowed access to. And when I successfully log in or unsuccessfully, it will generate an audit log. So there are a lot of moving parts within Entra ID that allow organizations to manage identity and access to first and third-party applications, both within the cloud and on-prem. Which brings me to my second question today. has your organization taken additional steps to protect Entra ID? And with additional steps, I simply mean, did you look at the system and go, there's a lot of information in here. What should I be doing to protect it? And which actions has that led to? Many, somewhat, no, we haven't thought about it, or hey, I think Microsoft has me covered. It's all are valid answers, just trying to get a general idea of how it lives within this audience. Let's give it a little bit more of a moment so people can fill it out. There's a very good division. So there's people who are already on it. They are working with it, just getting started, which roughly, those two roughly equate to half. Some are planning and some haven't started yet or are unsure. Thank you for answering that and for your honesty, which is honestly, this system has grown so fast, has become so popular that really it doesn't surprise me at all. So what I want to talk about today is about risk. And we're going to take a look at two very specific risks, which is a little simplified, but it covers every type of scenario we can end up with. It's malicious loss. So somebody was pushing a button, was trying to get into your environment or to do something to your environment, which caused data loss or loss of access. And there's accidental loss, which can vary from, hey, I pressed a button and something went wrong, to I deleted more than I should have, to Microsoft had a little oopsie and we lost a subset of data. But every element that can happen to Entra ID either falls in one of these two buckets. So what reasons do we have to protect Entra ID? When we look at business continuity, like I said, most organizations are avid users of third-party access. If I do not have access to my email, which is a Microsoft first-party application, or for instance, Salesforce, which is a third-party application, then I lose time in my day. And something happening, losing my user, losing a subset of users or a group or any of the other elements we just witnessed is reason for that business continuity to be in danger. Entra ID, because of the data it contains, basically the keys to your kingdom, is a primary target of attack. If I'm a cyber criminal, one of my key goals will always be to get access to Entra ID. To give you an example, a retailer within Europe had the incident where they got access to their Entra ID. The attackers had modified a couple of dormant accounts to have a different password and a different authentication profile. And the retailer couldn't figure out which accounts they had done this to. So every time when they locked out an account, the attackers came in through the other side, expanded their access again, and it became this kind of nasty game of cat and mouse where the organization tried to figure out which accounts were compromised and to restore those or lock those down. Accidental deletion or misconfiguration is something that happens almost every day. Well, not every day, but changes happen every day. So the opportunity for something to go wrong is also there every day. I was talking to our internal organization where someone who worked on Entra ID essentially said, well, we can have up to 40 changes in a day or a week. And it really all depends on how busy it is, on what things happen. If you, as an organization, are going through transitions, you have people being moving from one part of the organization to another, that's all opportunity to get a misconfiguration. Last but not least, compliance and audit requirements. Because of the criticality of the system, if you have cyber insurance, they will ask you, hey, what did you do to protect this crucial system? These are often not very specifically determined, but because Entra ID will contain usernames, password, BitLocker keys, and all that sensitive stuff that would allow access to other systems, it will quickly become a, hey, what did you do to protect that sort of conversation when you're talking to a compliance officer? In short, accidental deletion, hey, I pressed the button and it went wrong. Malicious deletion, I came in. And last, misconfiguration. When I say misconfiguration, by the way, I had someone, we were working with an organization that used Intune to manage their mobile devices. And they had a consultant who built out that entire profile, did an excellent job. And then they needed to do some changes on the fly. So somebody defined a policy that was supposed to catch a sub-level of an amount of devices. Instead, they enforced it on all the devices and everyone lost access. They could get in through a back door of sorts, but it still took them a couple of days to retrieve that issue. And it was a fairly simple type of configuration issue. Now, having explained the problem, let's take a little bit of a look at the solution. The NIST cybersecurity framework for us is a real easy way to talk about the various elements of, hey, have we looked at measures that identify risks, that protect the system, in this case, Entra ID or M365, depending on how broad you go. How do we detect if something's up? In what way do we respond if we detect anomalies? And how do we recover when it's all said and done? And because you want to tie a bow on it and make sure that you're end-to-end in control of the system, how do I govern, in this case, the security of my Entra ID, but in fact, my entire identity estate? For that, I just want to quickly take a little sidestep into something called the cyber kill chain. This is a very well-defined procedure which attackers use to get within systems. The point I'm going to make, so I'm already going to make it now and then I'll drive it home later, is that because you have malicious and accidental loss, there are two things you should be doing with your Entra ID or with your identity. One is to protect against malicious loss, and one is there to really protect against accidental. Those two will have some overlap, but they are two distinct strategies. So let's take a look at what that means. So when we look at the cyber kill chain and we take Entra ID in mind, there's a little bit of thing called reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is simply understanding on how to attack a system. This can go as broad as they want. It's very hard, but not impossible, to reduce the impact of reconnaissance, because many of our systems that we have connected to the internet are just there. They're connected to the internet. Entra ID or Microsoft 365, depending on how you want to address this through a first or third-party application, is publicly available. If you do not take any measures, anyone can go to login.microsoft.com. They can put in a username and password. It's completely fine. That can be a choice to have that, but you can also have the choice to reduce that in scope. Then there's weaponization. Hey, if I have a target, let's say I have a website. That website has a login. I know that that login is done with the company domain, but I can also find a vulnerability in that website because, hey, I know, for instance, it runs on, let me give a bad example, WordPress. And I know it's a vulnerable version of WordPress. Can I craft something, or can I find an exploit that I can use into that system? How do I deliver it? Well, depending on whether or not I can exploit a server, or maybe I send an email to a user who clicks a button. It can happen to anyone. Then that is the way we deliver. Then when they start exploiting, so they have access to that internal system, this is where Entra ID plays its most important role. That's where they can start doing their command and control and their lateral movement. Because if I get access to a system, let's say I get an admin, a piece of admin credentials. And these admin credentials, they give me access to a broader variety of systems. That means I can entrench better than I can do with the single account of the frontline worker I happen to compromise as we go along. Last but not least, actions and objectives. Usually when we've hit this point, it's too late. Doesn't mean there's no way to recover, but usually this is the point where they've achieved what they wanted to achieve and we're too late. Now, when we take that into Entra ID and we take that malicious exploitation, and we'll just move the accidental loss aside, we'll take the malicious attacker in hand. What did I do to identify risks on my Entra ID? How do I identify how someone would be able to get into that? Hey, what can I do in terms of admin sprawl? I mentioned compromising an admin account just now. Usually, and this has gone for most of the organizations I work for, bar one who could prove me that it was not true. Everyone has more admins than they want, right? You want to reduce that, you need to take active steps. Hey, if I'm a user who came in 10 years ago and I've went through 6, 7 different roles within the organization, maybe I still have privileges from early on. Those are very important. Then there's stale accounts because, hey, an old account that is not being used. And funnily enough, when I got out of university, I went and worked for an organization for a year. 9 months after my contract was up, my account was still active. Those are these vectors that cyber criminals will use. And I'll just flip back to this one. Part of reconnaissance, part of lateral movement is getting those accounts. So what am I doing to protect my Entra ID? There's a host of security measures that you will have, from access controls. Hey, maybe if I manage my Entra ID, I don't want people to manage it from the McDonald's somewhere around the corner, but I want them to be in office or at least in a sanctioned space. Hey, if I get an email, I want to make sure that it's checked. This can go pretty broad, which makes sense because there's so many different ways of accessing it. And unfortunately, Entra ID integrates with most of them. So, hey, what am I doing to protect here? What am I doing to detect and respond? Because, for instance, if I talk about backup of Entra ID, that's not going to help me detect and respond. It does help me with backing up as a preventative measure, but it won't help me understand what is happening to my identity and respond to that in kind. So what types of elements am I doing for Entra ID to make sure that I monitor what's happening? Hey, is someone logging into the system? Do I know who that is? Is it Stefan logging in from his house near Amsterdam? Or, wow, why is Stefan suddenly coming in from North Korea 20 minutes later? Impossible travel, but sometimes it's having the logs is one thing, but responding to the logs is another. Hey, once I figured out that Stefan's coming from North Korea, we might want to do something about that. So let's take a look what happened to the point where he actually logged in from there, or tried to log in at least, and make sure that we mitigate those steps until they're there. And I mentioned the store that played whack-a-mole with their cyber attackers for quite a long time, because at some point you want to go back to the time where you knew it was good. And that is where a restore comes in. And what are our lessons learned? Now, there are 2 key elements from Barracuda that I want to position for this. One of them really goes into protect, detect, and respond, and that's managed XDR. So what we do with that is, hey, we help you understand who's attacking, what's attacking, and why. You can do this with another vendor. I cannot say that to Ali too loudly because she'll get mad at me, but my idea here is that you think about, hey, what am I doing to detect and respond and to make sure that I get ahead of the problem? And we do that with Barracuda XDR. So we want to get ahead of someone trying to compromise an account by monitoring that cloud security. We want to monitor when someone sends phishing emails. We want to make sure that if someone tries to exploit your end user, that we're there on the endpoint going, no. And then when they try to traverse the network or the servers, we want to be able to see them, inform you of this, and then respond to it. So that's what our philosophy is. If you are a bad actor, this is what we have to throw against you to make sure that you're not getting to those coveted objectives. Now, I've talked about malicious actors for quite a bit. Let's talk about accidents, because accidents are usually, actually, that's a good thing to figure out. Is an accident more prevalent or a cyber criminal? There's some very interesting data on that, but that's not for now. So let me drive something home. If you are a customer of a software as a service company, they are most likely not backing up your data. We're talking about Microsoft here because we're talking about Entra ID. I'm not trying to bully them. I'll explain why. You have Microsoft looking after their services. They keep them up and running. They make sure that you have access when you're allowed access, and you look after your data, your identity. That's called the shared responsibility model. And I'm probably not saying something new because I've heard people banging this drum for years, but it's really important to understand that even if you have a SaaS service, you will have some responsibilities, and usually the data that you put into it is part of that. So here, when we look at Entra ID, the accounts and identities, the devices, information and data, up until logs, are all part of your responsibility. That doesn't mean there are no ways for you to recover your data within Entra ID, but it is quite limited. So Microsoft has some recoveries for 4 of the 13 objects within Entra ID. You can have something called a soft delete for users, M365 groups, and applications. This means that these go into a soft delete recycle bin where you can manually retrieve them from within 30 days. After that, they're gone. All other objects that are not users, groups, or applications are hard deleted. Once you remove them, they're gone. They must be reconfigured, and they must be recreated. And you may remember that about 20 minutes ago, I mentioned something about Intune, where you built these policies. These policies are all hard deleted. If you have mobile device management through Microsoft and you guard your environment through that, you lose policy, that's a hard delete. That's why we've got Barracuda Cloud to Cloud Backup Entra ID Backup Premium. And that is essentially what I showed you earlier: the users, groups, roles, and administrative units, the enterprise applications, the devices, audit logs, and everything, all in one neat package with a bow around it. Any data that you need in order for your organization to quickly come back up and running. And we have an example of an organization that had an accident with a hard delete. It would have cost them 7 days to recover if they had to do it manually. With us, they could have done it in 40 minutes. So when I say you need to protect your identity within Entra ID, I really do mean that. However you want to do that is, of course, up to you. But if I want to give you a good start, I would really recommend looking at Managed XDR for Cloud and Barracuda Cloud to Cloud Backup for Entra ID. It will cover the broadest set of risks involving malicious and accidental data loss. If it's malicious, we will help you detect and respond. If it's accidental, we'll restore the backup. You do not need to have a long thought process about it. Next, finish. We want to make your life easy. So now that I've talked a little bit about protect, detect, respond, recover, and just hark back to when you said, all right, I've started preparing my my organization for all of these, protecting Entra ID? Do I have protect, detect, respond, and recover covered? As a subset, if you do governance and if you do identify with them, you got this. You're already ahead of the curve. But if you've at least got these covered, then you've got a good basis to work for. Now, I'm just interested in how many people think, oh yeah, I got all this. It's all good. I'm going to do another one of these next year. And then I hope that the true and false are turned around. So for now, we see that about 60% says, no, we still have some things that we need to cover. No shame in that. That is definitely the way it is. This system has grown super fast. And there's already almost 40% that says, hey, we've got this end-to-end covered. That's great. So that actually brings me to our Q&A. Ali, did we get any questions?
Hard time coming off mute. Yes, we did. If you open up the chat, you can see some if there's any that you want to filter through there too. There was an interesting one that was here about misconfigurations though. So it said, what are the most common misconfigurations in Entra ID that lead to security vulnerabilities, and how can they be proactively identified?
So it is a very, very difficult question to answer simply because every organization does this differently. What I would, so when it comes to security misconfigurations, I think not removing stale accounts, not reducing privilege creep are probably the biggest two, because like I said, I've worked for one whole organization that from a security perspective did a regular cleanup of their entire Active Directory, and everything that was outside of their scope that said, okay, this has gotten wider attention or wider rights than it should, needed to be explained, which was an incredibly business intensive process. So usually, and what we see now is that there's tools out there, which we unfortunately do not have, I'm not even going to say yet, that allow us to baseline for, hey, this is what we want with our identity. This is how it deviates. But it's the problem is, and that will remain at least for a while, is that it's a very business intensive process to manually review those.
Right.
Which is unfortunately not my best answer, but it will have to do because that's just what it is.
There we go. The next question actually revolves around privilege creep, excuse me. So how does our solution help mitigate risks associated with that and stale accounts in Entra ID?
Because we help monitor. So if someone tries to exploit those accounts, we can't clean them up for you, unfortunately, because sometimes there's reasons why those accounts exist, but then they should at least be locked down to an extent. What we do is if we see, because we monitor the environment, if we see malicious activity from one of those accounts, we can respond to it and make sure that it gets cleaned up.
Right. We've got one with Carolyn who asked, outside of the basic setup where you create the platform for users, there's so much information about what your policies have. Is the standard default a bad one to go with?
No, it's not bad per se, but it's all about what you need at that point. So for organizations to stick with the defaults it's bad in the sense that it becomes predictable. But if it's what your organization needs, then it can be fine. If you cannot make the steps to lock it down further, then unfortunately that is what it is. But then at least monitor it if something goes wrong. If someone starts to do malicious activities, then that's the point where I would attack it. That being said, I've seen organizations that have very simple policies that had no problems. And then I've seen organizations that had hundreds upon hundreds of policies, one for every individual operating system on their laptops, phones, and everything. And that became a disaster. So the real answer is it's what if it's what your organizations need, you're good. But I would recommend getting some help maybe in identifying it further, maybe through one of our MSPs or a partner that can help you from that security angle, because it's definitely a project.
Right. Hopefully that answers your question, Carolyn. We've got another one that came in. If a company utilizes an MSP to manage their Azure and Entra ID tenant, what are some of the areas that they should be aware of for possible areas of attack that MSPs tend to look over when managing a customer?
Oh, that's a good one. So we've had this discussion. So we've had a couple of really big MSPs adopting, for instance, Entra ID backup, because they said, hey, listen, there's an expectation for customers that we protect it. So there's two areas. One, there's your own identity, the identity from the MSPs that help log in, help the functioning of the day-to-day organizations. That can be a risk in and of itself, because usually when you're a support engineer for an MSP, you will have additional privileges that you normally don't have. And second, the question should be, are you taking full responsibility for what your customer does with their Entra ID? If the answer is yes, then it's up to you on how you build the environment and which policies you enforce. Now, there is a group of products for MSPs that do cloud security posture management for Entra ID and for Microsoft. I would definitely encourage people to investigate that area, because it will help you manage your Entra ID security over multiple tenants. It's something that I would love for us to do, but I currently just don't. I do know that it exists.
Oh, great. We've got one from Melissa, said that we currently use Tagus XDR and Barracuda cloud-to-cloud backup. Besides upgrading to Barracuda Entra ID backup premium, what else would you recommend to round out Entra ID protection? Everything, the whole suite.
So one of the important things here is I don't really know what Tagus XDR does. I'm unfortunately not an expert on every product, but the question should be, hey, what preventative measures are you able to take? So, hey, how do you analyze your Entra ID? How do you make sure that your accounts are not stale, that there's a policy for automatic onboarding and offboarding users, for instance? That's a big one, because it will reduce privilege creep, and it will reduce admin sprawl. And usually it's also within the Microsoft 365 platform to help you analyze those sorts of things. That would be my first step to go. Now, when it comes to detection and response, you use Tagus XDR. If they serve your purpose, so they make sure that they ingest all the logs from Entra ID, correlate that with any other sources that you may have that you require, and then help you respond to that incident. And let's be real, deliver you a report afterward of what happened and what you should be doing to improve next time. That's great. Then last, yes, that would be the Entra ID backup premium, because hey, wait a minute, you want to come back to that original, it's good. Sounds to me that if you're doing XDR and you've already got a form of cloud-to-cloud backup, you've already looked a little bit more at detect, respond, and now maybe recover, but then it comes into the analyze part of things. Hey, what accounts do I have that can potentially be abused?
Great question, Melissa. Got one from Joe. Joe said, is there any protection you can offer before auth, streaming authorization? Because auth endpoints are public, brute force in discovery of our vulnerabilities. Most built-in Entra ID security is performed after authentication. I'm sure.
Absolutely correct. What I would do So your mileage may vary. If I am confronted with that element, this is what I would do because I've done it for another organization. I would make sure that there's a conditional access policy that says that anything in the organization is only allowed when it comes through specific pre-identified IP endpoints, which is a configuration you at least could make 2 years ago. I would have to review that now. What I would do is then we do something similar with Secure Edge, where we have an application VPN on our clients that says, hey, wait a minute, if it goes to M365, it always goes through the VPN. Once the auth is done, we do the rest directly, which means that we only protect the pre-auth. Nobody is allowed to authenticate unless they come from these specific IP addresses. But that's definitely, you are correct, outside of the prerogative of Entra ID, because Entra ID will only look at it when it's already with Entra ID, not before it gets to it. Hope that answers your question.
There's another one that said, is there support for granular recovery of Entra ID objects? For example, specific roles or conditional access policies, or is it a full object restoration only?
Nope. You can restore an individual policy. You can restore a lot of policies, or just some.
Okay. Going from Jerry, what level of licensing do we need with Microsoft Entra in order for Barracuda XDR to fully support?
I believe, bear with me, I'd need to double check this. I believe this is the answer, but I'm happy to have this followed up with you afterward. I believe that the only difference between the various licenses is how much we can see, but I believe a P1 is enough.
Okay.
Or let me say it differently. I believe there are no specific licensing requirements. We'll always be able to find something, but I'd need to verify that. So I'm happy to get back on that.
From what I have research-wise is that it does the P1 license for all users. We can double check too. Good question, Jerry. Another question was, how does Barracuda Solutions support compliance and audit requirements for organizations subject to regulation?
So that is actually my favorite question right now. We've just launched Purge on Demand, the ability to purge data from your environment, which allows you to remove data once it needs to be outside your environment. This will go into a full-blown retention policy element somewhere later this year. Aside from that, the entire Barracuda cloud-to-cloud backup is both ISO 27001 and SOC 2 certified. So we've got everything end-to-end. We inform through our audit log all the actions that happen with the system. Anything you can do within Barracuda cloud-to-cloud backup is logged. So anything you would need that we could think of within these regulations where it comes to data storage, data retention, et cetera, we can deal with.
All right. Let's see. How does AI enhance threat hunting capabilities specifically within the context of identity-based attacks on Entra ID?
It's almost a simple learning process. So essentially, with AI learning, more data is always better. That means if I can grab information from multiple endpoints, say, for instance, I'm monitoring the endpoint of a user, and that user sends a login from that endpoint, then I know, okay, I can 100% validate that it's there. System understands that. It's really good at doing all the boring things. Now, when a user starts doing things outside of what they would normally do, then it helps us flag that earlier. What it also helps us to do is grab information from multiple sources. If we get a flag from something, say, yeah, let's take a look at an Entra ID failed login from a suspicious location. We can theoretically quickly correlate that to other networking and other elements where we say, okay, hey, wait a minute, why does Stefan, who's sitting in his office in the Netherlands, suddenly do 500 logins from somewhere within the company network? That would be pretty bad, but it allows us to quickly grab all that information and rather than spend 15 minutes trying to validate, get the high level elements to understand of what it is that we're looking at, just pick up the phone and give you a call in a minute rather than 15, because every second counts when it comes to a compromise. A couple of years ago, say a couple, but I think it's over 10. They said that 250 days within an environment was not an exception. We're bringing that time shorter and shorter to sometimes mere days or mere hours or mere minutes of a compromise. That's the type of thing that an AI enables us to do.
Wonderful. Those are all the questions that we have so far. If there's any other last minute questions, please send them on in. We will be here for another minute or so. Stefan, while we're here, are there any other questions that you generally get to that maybe we haven't answered here? Maybe anything about like the XDR integrations or visibility, and maybe from like an XDR perspective of does it also review all of the Entra ID information?
Let me think. No, there were so many good questions that I'm still archiving them in my own head. There's quite a lot of good ones. So what we typically, so one of the ones that I haven't heard yet is, hey, when it comes to restoring, can we restore Entra ID components to alternative locations? That's a no. Anything in Entra ID can only exist in one place, which is something that in the way Microsoft built it up. So if we're restoring an element that still exists, everything is super simple. We can keep that. If it needs to rewrite something, it causes something called a new ID. Those need to be referenced correctly. That's the only thing. That's the only big gotcha in everything that has to do with Entra ID. It's not just us, it's everyone.
All right. Well, then I think we will go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you to all who attended and for your wonderful questions, participation. We truly appreciate it. Just a reminder, you will be getting a copy of the recording and some of the important resources that Stefan was talking about in an email from me probably tomorrow morning. If you have any other questions, please reach out to us. We love to have them. And I think that is all for me. Very special to you. Thank you to you also, Stefan. All right, I hope you have a great rest of your day, everybody, and we will see you next time.